Steven, how are you?
I'm great. How you doing, Vin?
I'm good. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate being here. Thanks
All
for
right.
having me.
Okay, so how about a quick 30-second introduction of who is Steven?
Man, 30 seconds? Okay.
Or more, or more.
So, I'm an academic turned entrepreneur who now runs a YouTube channel called Think It Through, and I help people use critical thinking to control their life.
Interesting. Okay, we'll get into all of that, but I really am interested in where you grew up, your formative years, your hometown, etc. Can you start us off there?
Yeah, I'm originally from Pennsylvania. I'm a New Yorker now. I've been a New Yorker for what I think it's almost 15, maybe like 13 years now. So I've been in New York for a while, but I grew up in Pennsylvania. Went to high school there, and eventually went into my undergrad in New Jersey. A small liberal arts college, small liberal arts university, Drew University, and then went on to Columbia here in New York, which is why I'm here and I stayed. But there, I actually studied history and philosophy. And while I was at my undergrad, I got really interested in something called value theory. I studied a lot of different. Obviously, when you have history and you have philosophy, there's a lot of overlap and looking into kind of deep questions. So I started to kind of work with a lot of my mentors at the time. They became mentors who were professors at the time, and they really encouraged me to look deeper and do a lot more research into this idea of value that's central to pretty much everything. Value touches everything. The most obvious one is like economic value, right? Economic value, artistic value, historical value, cultural value. So I said, I think digging into this will really help me understand human decision making, psychology, because going back to, you talked about my formative years. Ever since I was young, ever since I can remember, I always wanted to make some sort of impact in some way. Very ambiguous, but I came to kind of realize that if you really want to make a tangible impact, you have to understand human behavior, right? You can't just say nice sounding things and give advice that sounds great, and but there's no kind of scientific backing to it. I've always wanted to investigate these questions because of that. So
I see. Okay, so
yeah.
when you were in high school, did you really know what you wanted to study going into college, or how did that work out?
No idea. When I was in high school, I never I here's the thing. In high school, I really was quite aimless. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I kind of was always still kind of thoughtful. I was never very, like, I think a lot of people can relate. I was never like the popular kid, like social, outgoing and stuff like that. I was really like, I grew up very much an introvert, and I actually struggled in school early on in math in particular. And it wasn't really until I got to higher levels of education that I started to really love like math, the sciences, and I got my introduction, funny enough, to philosophy in high school, in actually a high school class, and I said, "Wow, okay, this is something I want to investigate more." Later, I found out that you know it's great for investigating and being a wiser person maybe, but money wise, that kind of thinking later, I realized, okay, that doesn't make money. so
Right.
so I ran into trouble later, but I've come full circle because of some things I've realized about money along the way.
Yes, and I
Yeah.
love that transformation because I know you did talk to about it in a few of your videos, what I caught on to. So were you like a pretty decent student, average student, or during that time?
I I was pretty decent, except for I would say, actually, no. You're kind of, as you're recalling, making me recall here. I think the first time, when I started out in high school, I was probably like, I remember handing in a book report the first book report ever, like in your whatever freshman year, and I thought, oh, this is so good, this is so good, and then I got it back, and it's like, oh wow, you know, professor wanted to talk to me because I got an F, and like, this is why I really want to address this with you. So my writing was absolutely terrible. My math was not so good. You know, and here's kind of the lesson in this that I have learned is that I I so my writing, because it was so terrible, but it wasn't until I got a real interest in a topic that my writing just flourished. And you know, maybe we'll get to it, but you know, I've ended up writing a whole book that's with an academic publisher later on, and you know, writing is something that I can now do in my sleep. I love it, but it got to that point because now. Because at that point in time, I found something that I really, really loved to investigate, and I was able to apply my skills. Same thing with math. When I actually ended up, at first, actually, I was doing a program in Columbia in grad school to kind of get the requirements to be able to go to med school at the time, pre-med. And I said, I really want this goal, right? I really want to go for this goal. So I had to do well in statistics. I had to do well in calculus. I had to do well. So I kind of just said, just changed my thinking, and I said, okay, I'm going to do well in all these things. I have to do well in all these things. Now I love statistics. I love calc. I love, you know, whatever, differential equations, all that nerdy stuff.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, because I wanted to drop on that because most people think like me. I thought like, okay, if you're good at math in high school, you're just naturally good at math in college, you know.
Sure.
And I'm not,
Sure.
or someone else isn't, so he's not, you know. Whereas you or other people just prove me wrong, where you were in an environment where you had to learn and you wanted to learn, and until you were in that writing period of your life, you flourished. Whereas before,
Yeah.
someone could look at your grades and said, well, sophomore year, maybe not going to be the best writer, which is totally wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Though I mean, there's more and more research nowadays in the past decade, and it's really, really prolific now. All this research about neuroplasticity and project-based learning and how we learn best, really through projects. Because I think, you know, we're kind of getting into an interesting topic here, but you know, in school, and this is kind of as partially having an educational background, because you know, which we'll go into later, I guess. I see a lot of how curriculum is designed, and it's unfortunate for the teachers because they have no control over it. But you know, kids are sitting there, and I'm sure you can relate, and any of your listeners can relate. When you were in school, like, did you understand why you were learning math? Did you understand why you were learning science? Did you understand why you were learning whatever Shakespeare? No, it really wasn't relevant. You were just told, do it, you know? And so if we have more of a project-based element in the learning process where people say, hey, you know, what's a project you're interested in? And then the kids go and find, oh, I need some math skill for that. Oh, I need to know some history for that. Oh, you know, and so on. It guides you to what you're motivated to learn. So
I think you bring up a really good point. And I know a lot of the time when I was a student, it was all about getting the grade, getting an A.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
it was all
exactly.
about testing
Exactly.
well, and all of that, and being a good student. And then
Yeah.
after my undergrad, and I went to graduate school, then I was like, you know, don't focus on the grades because it really doesn't matter. You know, it's all about learning. What is education for? It's about learning, not necessarily
Yeah.
like taking an exam and then showing people you got an A and then moving on.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Well, and it's interesting because a lot of and I know you're in the entrepreneurship space too, but later I got into entrepreneurship and kind of we'll maybe get into that a little bit. But what I found as I transitioned from academia into entrepreneurship is I found that a lot of the entrepreneur space and a lot of the content that's put out there nowadays talks about how, you know, oh, school is, you know, don't even think about school. School is not even, you know, important. And I actually get where they're coming from in a sense because I get the frustration with it. But at the same time, if I think those people who say those things in the entrepreneurship space, they're kind of like overcorrecting, right? It's to the other extreme. where okay, school's not important at all, education's not important at all, like knowing science, history, like these things, it's not important at all. No, I think it's important to be an entrepreneur and also be well-rounded, like have a lot of this knowledge to be able to draw upon to be innovative, right? To be somebody who's you know, creating new things, right? And innovating.
And I totally agree. And I watched your video about Range by the book by David Epstein, and you talked
Yeah,
about
great book.
how entrepreneurs need to know history, philosophy, social sciences to see the big picture, to put the dots together. And I just totally
Exactly.
love that because I totally agree with you. So,
Yeah.
okay, so you're at Drew University and you decide to study history and philosophy. Did anyone come to you and say, "What are you going to do with that? You want to study
Yes,
computer science?
all
Why
the
don't you study
time.
accounting?"
All the time, all the time.
Okay.
But I was actually, it's funny because I was actually into it kind of segues naturally because I was always into entrepreneurship without knowing I was into entrepreneurship. I just never called it entrepreneurship. Even when I was in my undergrad, I actually just thought I was lazy. And most people would just say, "Hey, you're really lazy." But I had this attitude in my undergrad, like that that I never wanted to clock in somewhere. I never wanted to work for a boss. I just wanted to sit around with my friends and talk about philosophy, right? I just wanted to do that. And, this idea, and even I told myself, wow, I guess you're just pretty much a slacker. That's all you want to do. But I realized as I later got into entrepreneurship that, actually all that time, I actually just didn't want to work for a boss. I didn't want to be controlled by somebody. And still, like when I talk about critical thinking, I talk about critical thinking, on my channel. I talk about critical thinking from that attitude. Like we should be better critical thinkers, not because we want to be nerdy academics. It's great, whatever, right? Do your academic thing, but the idea here is don't be controlled by somebody else, right? Have your own independence of mind, so you could be a free person, and that. I think that is a theme that has run through my whole life. Anything that I've done, so
I love
yeah,
it. I love it. Yeah, critical thinking, that's one of your big themes, and we'll touch
yeah,
upon that. Yes, when I was in college, I went to a small liberal arts college in central Minnesota, St. John's University and the College of St. Benedict,
uh-huh.
so Catholic colleges.
Okay,
And I ended up majoring in like business, international business. And
yeah,
that was my biggest regret because I had my advisor at the time, my Chinese history, Asian studies history professor. I was
uh-huh.
like, "Dr. Bohr, what should I major in? I really want to, work in the business world, things like that." And he said, like, "You should be a history major." And I kind of just like did a double take. I'm like, I didn't tell him at the time, but I'm like, God, I don't want to be like a high school history teacher. That's the last thing I wanted to do. And so I stuck out with my major, and I totally regret that because I love
Yeah.
history, and I wish I studied history. So for those young people out there that are a sophomore, they're major undecided, and
Uh-huh.
they most likely will be up in the business world. So why study history? Why study philosophy?
Well, so it's very simple. It's very simple because research has shown, and this isn't just my opinion. I mean, it's my personal experience, but research really has shown. A lot of research has shown that the more diverse perspectives that we have, the more we are able to make connections between things that people do not see, that other people who are just focused on one track will not see. They will not see the connections. I mean, a classic example is Einstein. Einstein was actually a great polymath. Not all scientists were as much of a polymath as he was, but part of what he attributed to his ability to make these incredible connections that he would make was in part due to a lot of the fields that he exposed himself to, and that's a part of what he credits for his. The theory of relativity is basically a work of creativity. I mean, it is. So there's a lot to be said for it. I would say that there is a kind of an imbalance within our school system. Once again, when you get into university, you have these conflicting messages, and I actually have a video about this. But you do have these conflicting messages that you feel people tell you. Vin, go. College is for getting a good career, right? And on the other side, you get this other conflicting message, and so conflicting, and I don't even know how people square that circle, right? They have to deal with this conflict. But the other conflicting message is, no, go to college because you become a well-rounded person.
Yes.
Do those two go together? I mean, they can, but they often conflict because you have the economic incentive. So I would say to anybody who's a young person, you're college or just got out of college, there you can always you could use school instrumentally. Use school instrumentally, sure, in terms of get that degree to be able to, strategically slide into the career that's going to make you money, but have a long-term plan, right? Be studying these other things outside to make yourself more valuable to the job market, or to a business that you're going to start, and leverage whatever is going to make you money immediately. Save that up. I wish I had actually done this, because I'm speaking from my own regrets. Save up a lot of money, and then later, once you save up a lot of money, invest a little bit, S&P, whatever you need to do, just to get yourself financially stable. Then you can think, okay, what are some decisions I want to make in terms of business opportunities, or longer range plans, like starting a YouTube channel, starting something that's gonna be my passion, right? So, but along the way, okay, so I'm in university. I'm in my undergrad university. I speak to. I'm doing. I'm studying like crazy, and I'm really enjoying my life, right? I'm broke, but I'm enjoying my life, and I'm reading so many books. I would go into the library every single week, take out a stack of books, come back the next week, return those, get another stack of books, because again, I was obsessed with this idea of, all right, understanding value, understanding human decision making, because I thought, okay, that somewhere in here, there's the secret. There's some secret, right, to like making the world a better place. I know it sounds romantic, but there's some secret here, and I wanted to understand what that secret was. And so I think I was always looking for whatever that secret was, and kind of out of this was born this. I started writing this project of just writing based on my annotations that I would make from books, from research articles. Like I subscribed to, even though I didn't have money, like I would sign up for like journals and stuff like that. So anyway, I was getting a lot of this information and noting it, and then just writing, and what became a new value theory. And at that point in time, like a new theory of value, like what is value, how does it direct our behavior, all that stuff. And I passed it by a few professors, and I said, do you really think I could get this published? And fortunately, because a lot of academics can be very egotistical and like, no, you're an undergrad. How could you can never, you don't even have a PhD. You're never going to get published. How could you even think about that? Go get more school first, right? Listen to your experts first, or whatever. And they said, no, you know what? I think you got something here. Like, if you think you can get it published, go, like, get it published. Go submit it. And I'm making a long story short here, but once I got into Columbia, which is for another reason I went to more school. Actually, I'll be quick about that. The reason I went to more school was actually more like a delay tactic, because I didn't know what I was going to do. So I said, okay, I'll go to more school. But anyway, so while I was there, it's funny, I devoted my time to my studies, but in any space of time that I had, I was continuously drafting, redrafting, writing, rewriting this thing. And then submitting it, rejection, until an academic publisher got it, and they said, this is, we want to peer review this. And I was like, wow. Like, without a PhD, like I got this thing published. So, yeah, so it's, I was just very driven. I think there's kind of a lesson here, and it sounds a little too good to be true, because I know a lot of people have heard, oh, if you just have the right attitude and you have the right drive, you can achieve any goal. Okay, true. There's a simplified, that's oversimplified, but there is a technically true thing about this. One is, I think, if you pursue something with a lot of drive and you have the level of obsession, and I would say you have to have obsession. You probably agree with me because you've run a business. You
Yes.
have to have a level of obsession. I think if you have a certain level of obsession and it and you have that level of dogged persistence and any obstacle that gets in your way, you're just gonna like chew right through it. You're gonna find a way. That attitude, there is good research. There's actually really good research on the fact that it will all else equal, that will increase the probability you're gonna get to your goal.
Yeah.
So, um, you know, so that's a little bit of that. But anyway, so where are we here? I think we're in my higher education, and yeah, that's how I published that. So
Okay. So we're now you've decided to go to Columbia University. What program were you in?
I was in the School of General Studies. It was like a post-bac pre-med program that was it's a program that is kind of designed to give you all the courses you need to get into med school.
Oh,
to
so
apply to med.
you're thinking of med school.
I was.
I mean, in terms of getting this degree and then moving on to medical school.
I was,
time.
and I actually was. I wanted to get what was called a MD PhD, do an MD PhD
Yes,
program,
heard of those.
and the reason was that I didn't see any other. I always knew, right? So from my undergrad, I told you, I knew I wanted to, live a certain lifestyle, not clock in to a boss and all that stuff, and I said, okay, well, what's the way to do that? The only way that I know to do that is to get an MD PhD. I'll spend 8 to 12 years in school.
Wow.
And and I'll be able to do all the research I want with a PhD, right? By getting the PhD in that social sciences degree or whatever, and then MD, I'll be financially set. So
Okay.
that was my reasoning, but not very good reason. Not very good reason to do that program. Not a very good reason at all. So I pursued. I was on the way to that, and what totally just broke that for me was that I saw another possibility. I started to see another possibility of a way to get to that kind of lifestyle that I wanted. And that
Through
that
what? Like a book or a video? What do you mean
no,
by
and that
alternative?
well that's how I got into business. And
Ah.
so that is when like I just connected with a friend, and they told me about like a direct sales opportunity, and I didn't know about direct sales or whatever. Like I didn't know about business or anything at that time, and I said, you know what, I'll give this a shot. I was so naive, and then it was the complete opposite, because the idea was I wanted to be independent. I was just looking for an opportunity to be financially independent, have that freedom of time. And I said, okay, maybe this is a way to do it. But it was so far afield from what I was used to. But it ended up being a really great experience, even though I no longer do it. But I did it for 10 years, but it ended up being a great experience because it was face to face, very in your face sales that I had to learn, right? Uh, building teams of salespeople, which is like, if you've ever worked with it's not easy to work with a team of 3 people versus let alone 10, 20 people. So it was very, very different from what I was used to, and I at first approached business from the standpoint of what I was used to in academia. Oh, to sell something, you have to think about what are the details and facts and figures, behind the thing, which is, if about sales, that's not how you sell something, right?
Right.
For the most part, unless you're in some very technical B2B, whatever.
Right.
So, long story short, I mean that's 10 years. I did quite well with that. I did even better when I got into running a business later. I ended up running both businesses at the same time. I'm fast forwarding 5 years, 6 years maybe from then. Going. I did not succeed at first. I went failure after failure after failure in that business. But 5 years later, I was at a pretty good place financially with it, and I said, you know what? I'll do this other business too, right? Which was a more of a traditional business. It was a a test preparation, college preparation agency in New York City, and just out of a physical location. And we had classes there and all that stuff. That was a freak chance. Well, I wouldn't say freak chance. I was doing a lot of networking. Let me put it that way. At that time, I learned very over that couple of years how to like network with people, connect with people, build build relationships and all that all that stuff that you hear. And as an introvert, that stuff was very challenging to me, but I started to get pretty good at it. And as networking goes, you get opportunities, you find other opportunities. This person said, "Hey, why don't we partner up and do this agency?" I said, "Okay." That was when I made like more money than I've ever made. That was incredibly profitable, but doing both, especially doing both businesses at the same time, huge mistake because it was like I had no life. It was extraordinarily taxing. You fast forward, well, there are a lot of skills that I learned in both businesses. I mean, that's an ocean in and of itself. But fast forward, why I decided to do YouTube is eventually I kind of, I retired the agency because it was just too much of a strain. Fortunately, it was like right before COVID, like a year before COVID. So that business kind of would have been toast anyway if I were still doing it a year from then. But I learned so much from both businesses. The reason I got into YouTube was eventually I just found myself just getting up day after day. Like, what am I doing? I'm just going through the motions. Right? Get up, go through my contact list, make contacts, add new contacts to the list, get new leads. Call the leads, have appointments. Like it was just like do trainings. It was really just getting to be a grind. Just repeat. So I said, okay, I've always wanted to do certain things. Like the reason I kind of went back to the reason I started that business in the first place, way long ago. I said I wanted to live a certain lifestyle, wanted to do certain things. But I found, and maybe you or your listeners can relate to this, I found at a certain point I was using the business to kind of make an excuse and push off the things that I really wanted to do. In other words, well, I'll just do that when I'm at a certain other level. I'll do that when I get to, this level. And it just kept pushing off the goal or pushing off those things I really wanted to do, in this case, YouTube, which I had wanted to do for a while. More academic work that I had wanted to do for a while. And, I said, what really made me make the decision was I found a coach. I actually found a YouTube coach. I had been studying some social media actually originally for my original business. I said, well, maybe I can enhance my business with social media. And then eventually I said, maybe I can enhance it with YouTube, do some shorts or whatever. And eventually I did get connected with a coach, a YouTube coach, who really knew what she was doing. And I said, okay, maybe this is the opportunity. Maybe this is the kind of bridge to where maybe this is the timing. And so I guess that's what made me say, okay, I'm gonna go all in. I'm gonna forget about everything else. I'm gonna leave behind everything else. And it was a hard decision because it's like it was a total change of my routine. Change of identity, change, all that stuff. I said I'm just gonna leave that stuff behind, that business, everything, and I'm gonna go full focus into my my YouTube career. Right?
You talking about full-time YouTuber, or are you?
I would say I'm pretty much a full-time YouTuber. I do have so I don't have a full-time income from YouTube yet. From YouTube, but I do have so like I do some academic coaching still.
Yeah. Okay.
That kind of that kind of is income and YouTube though, like it's very, very flexible. I'm able to do it with flexible schedule. So, but within this next year, my goal is to, I have a whole business plan with it, and my goal is to replace my income. So yeah.
All right, so let's get to your YouTube channel. It's pretty impressive. It looks like, from what I came across, it's self-development, educational, critical thinking skills, that type of nature. Wouldn't you say that kind of summarizes your channel?
Yeah. So the tagline it is embrace critical thinking, change the world, and it sounds very lofty and ambitious. But the thing is, here's kind of the vision for the channel. What I have noticed in the past couple of years is kind of an increasing extreme opinions of everybody, right? On so many sides of society, within so many levels of society, we're all just so opposed, and we're I think we've gotten into this just as a culture. I mean, worldwide, not just America. It's worldwide. We are in a position, I think, in history where we've been many times actually, where we just are making decisions based on gut instinct and emotion, or making judgments based on gut instinct and emotion. And it's what causes a lot of the society to, I call it like the pendulum of history, that pendulum to swing. Here it swings here, right? Now it's going to swing back to some other extreme and swing back and swing back and forth, and I really believe that embracing critical thinking, meaning what you'd call metacognition, reflection on our own beliefs, reflection on how we arrive at those beliefs, not a demonization of any kind of beliefs, but really just a reflection on our beliefs. I actually really believe that if we engage in that more, we will have a more stable, more functional society. I mean, however you define that, but I think we'll have a more stable, more functional society, and more success personally as individuals, because critical thinking exists in this part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is decision making, which is executive function, and when we're operating more in that part of our brain, we are more self-determining, if that makes sense. When we're operating more in what's called our limbic system, which is the fear-based responses, emotional-based responses, just gut-based responses, we're not free. If you think about it, we're not fully free and self-determining. We are programming, so to speak, is just determining our thoughts, actions. So the goal is to not have some opinion. Everybody should be liberal or conservative or libertarian or whatever, or everybody should be, should think one way or be religious or anti-religious. No, that's the whole point is determine what you believe, but not based on a gut instinct. Work from up here. We have it for a reason, right? So build our beliefs from that prefrontal cortex type thinking, and of course the other types of thinking, the emotional side does have a role. I'm not saying to be a robot. That's very important as well, but it's too imbalanced toward that right now. We need to kind of bring it more back as a society toward that prefrontal cortex type thinking.
Yes.
Yeah.
So critical thinking, independent thinking is kind of what you're getting at. And then I loved how you talked about the prefrontal cortex, and then you mentioned about it as a muscle, and you need to challenge yourself, and you need to actually read books in order to challenge your thinking.
Yeah.
So if I'm liberal, I'm progressive, then I should read books on the other side, about conservatism.
Exactly. And, on all sides, because even in it's kind of getting into political discussion. I always, I've always thought, let me avoid the topic of politics, but I really don't think you can avoid the topic of politics. It's everywhere in some form or fashion. But yeah, even challenging that, there's not liberal or conservative. There are many things in between. There are many sides. There's libertarian. I mean, there are many sides, uh, and at least understanding. I mean, not saying you have to, take an extreme position or something, that that's fundamentally against your core values, but the idea is, what are your core values?
Right.
Or have you read enough, considered enough to really understand what your core values are? And I think a lot of us really think we know what our core values are, but the core values come from actually challenging our values. We get to know our values much better by challenging them in having conversations, like real conversations.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but have you noticed? If you ever look at debates on YouTube or on TikTok, what's the format of the debate? Well, it's a debate, meaning I'm trying to prove you wrong, and I'm trying to make you look bad,
Yep.
and vice versa. And I believe that, okay, that has a place. It does have a place, right? For instance, in a parliament, you should have, let's say, people arguing different positions. Sure, makes sense. In a conversation, I believe the goal should be different, and we should have more conversations that are focused on not me proving and getting one up on you, and
Yeah.
showing that you're an idiot. We should embrace more of a culture of, okay, let's understand what each other believes, why we believe it, and at the end of the day, here's the beautiful thing, and I think I've come to really embrace this over time. Here's the beautiful thing. If at the end of the day, each person still has the kind of the same belief or the same position, that's awesome. I love that, because even if you maintain, you might have changed your position after a conversation on something or your viewpoint. But if you maintain the same position, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing too, because at least you have a more informed way of understanding it, and you've exposed yourself to the other point of view, and it's more deliberate. You might be more likely to think a little bit more deeply, before taking action or saying something in the future, right? Based on the fact that you had that conversation,
Yeah.
right?
I like it. So instead of the got you moment, seek for understanding, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, the philosopher Jürgen Habermas. I love talking about. I've talked about him a couple of times. He's a German philosopher. After World War II, he basically witnessing what the Nazis had done. He said, there's got to be a solution, right? And there's got to be. He kind of really shook up his thinking, and he said, okay, well, he came up with this idea of the ideal speech situation, and he identified different goals of different conversations. One goal of a conversation, he's called it strategic action, and then the other goal of a conversation is communicative action. So what we see a lot is that strategic action, meaning my strategy, my goal is to undermine you, versus communicative action is my goal is to understand each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Easier said than done, but
Right.
it takes effort. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So your channel, one thing that made you stand out, because a lot of YouTubers, they have the self-development, top 10 books to read about business,
Yeah.
top 10 of this and that. And you have like a counter narrative. You're like, don't really read these books, but start here first.
Yeah.
You talk about Jim Quick and
Yeah.
some others. I like that angle. So tell me a little bit more about that.
So yeah, I mean, I started with a little bit of a contrarian approach there, and the thing is, it's not necessarily just to be contrarian, but it is a little bit of a reaction to what I see, as let me just come from my own experience. When I got into direct sales, I got into business in the first place. My mentors told me, hey, read these books, read How to Win Friends and Influence People, read what is it, Think and Grow Rich, and and over time I built this huge repertoire of self-help books that I had read, kind of on top of the previous kind of philosophy books and science books I had read. And what I started to, because I had kind of been in both worlds, eventually I had been reading so much self-help, so many business books that are genuinely helpful. I'm not going to lie, they are very genuinely helpful. But what I came to appreciate was, well, there's a lot of stuff that people don't read that is actually that they should be reading, that is extraordinarily helpful. And they're only looking at these modern self-help books. Well, let's take a look at some other stuff that, again, might offer a different perspective for personal growth, for leadership, for all sorts of wealth creation, whatever the aspect is that you're interested in. There are a lot of aspects of that we can find in classical works. We can find in great things that are published, actually more on the behavioral sciences end. That, and what I appreciate about that field in particular is a lot of these claims, or when people write a book like that in the behavioral sciences, or it's more directed toward behavioral science, let's say, like a great book that I just read recently. I'm forgetting the title already.
It happens.
but they have a common practice of putting citations in the book for whenever they make a claim. Oh, here's the citation. Oh, I can actually look that up and see if that's that's a valid, real claim. Whereas I see the problem that I see in a lot of self-help books is you see a lot of, yes, there's successful people who wrote the book, maybe, but they don't put any citations in the book. Well, you'd say, well, why is that a problem? That's their personal experience, and they're a successful person. You should listen to them. And that's true in one sense, and it's not true in another sense, because there's a cognitive bias that we all have. That is, it's called survivorship bias, right? When we reach a certain point, our memory is an interesting thing. When we reach a certain point, we actually reinterpret our memory of what we did and how we got there, and it's just a thing our brain does. And we're good at we're good storytellers. We're good at creating narratives of how we went from A to Z, and it often becomes oversimplified. It often becomes, in many cases, not actually true, or maybe they downplay, unknowingly maybe downplayed or didn't talk about the obstacles, right? And so, or didn't really fully flesh out how to avoid that obstacle. They just say, be more motivated or whatever, something like that. So there are a lot of issues that I see in that sense from classic self-help books, although I want to say they are, for the most part, quite helpful. Still quite helpful. Not trashing them at all. A lot of them are really, really helpful.
Okay, so your main theme is critical thinking, independent thinking, think for yourself. I'm sold. What's some advice you would give for someone that's just starting on his or her journey, wants to get started? What should he or she do? First step.
I think the most important thing is to find a group that shares the same goals and interests as you. So if you want to learn more about business, then join people who are join a mastermind of some sort. I mean, Napoleon Hill, right, came up with that term of mastermind. But join some mastermind group of people who are working on the same goal. Be collaborative. Really, one thing I would say, if I had to say one of the most valuable skills or things that I got from the business world that I never got and that I never learned in school, was making connections with people. What you'd call networking. I actually don't like that term, but connecting with other people, having conversations, attending groups, right? Learn. The best way to learn, at the end of the day, yes, books are good, but the best way to learn is not from a book. It's not from a book at all. The best way to learn is having conversations. Again, same thing we talked about with critical thinking, having an assumption, asking a question, and testing that assumption with somebody who might have some different experience from you, right?
Okay.
And if that's in business, so join groups. Join groups. Get out there in the real world. If you're alone in your room somewhere, that's the wrong place to be. Get out and take that first step of getting out to network with a group. It could be on a Zoom as well. You
Sure.
could arrange. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Okay, let's switch gears. Let's get behind the scenes of your YouTube channel. I noticed
Sure.
that you have a lot of really good like transitions and B-roll and
I
all of
appreciate
that.
it.
Do you do all the work yourself, or do you outsource that?
No, no, fortunately not. When I first started, see, this is the thing about, now we're getting into like the logistics of running a YouTube channel, which is a really interesting conversation. I've learned, I'm not, as I said off air, I am not an expert on YouTube, but I have learned from experts. I have been learning from experts. I still have coaching that I pay for my channel. But and when I first started, I I was doing all the editing myself, and I'm actually grateful for that because I did learn a good amount about editing. I think at first when you start a channel, it is good to try some editing for yourself, at least for the first few months of doing it, just because when you do get an editor, you are able to speak their language. Oh, here I want this overlay. Here I want the B-roll shot. I want the a jump cut here. Like you're able to use a lot of those terms. You're not and communicate more easily with the editor of what you want, what you're looking for. So yeah, eventually I got an editor. Actually had to go through a couple of editors. It
U.S.
takes
based or like Upwork, online,
so
Fiverr?
so the second one I had was U.S. based. The person I have currently is Europe based.
Okay.
So European. So yeah, I mean, I found finally it takes a while. I will tell
Yeah.
you, it takes because it's just like working with anybody, whether you're recruiting for like a company or you're hiring somebody, whatever that is, or you're finding a business partner. I'm sure you have the same, you can relate to that.
Sure.
It's like you have to, at first in a new industry, you don't know the red flags, right?
Yeah. Right.
And then but then by making mistakes you learn the red flags, and you also learn the green flags of like what you really want and expect. So I've learned by doing and making mistakes, and I know kind of exactly what I want out of an editor now. So it's yeah,
Okay. And then
it's good.
if people sign up for your information, you get a newsletter, and
Yes.
then I get to your landing page. Now, what's that
Yes.
program? Something with the dream kind of development?
Yeah. Yeah, so
Tell us
so
about
I
that.
do so I have a course. It's called the Dream Life System, and it basically condenses all of everything that I've learned over and experienced that I've talked about over the past 10 or so years, maybe 11 years now, about how to, because I've done so many transitions, right, in terms of career and business. It kind of guides somebody about how to go through that process, right? How to actually find and determine what it is that you want to create in your life in terms of whether that's a business, a project, dream project, and how to practically go from where you are now to achieving that. And so that's a course that focuses on that. Then I do have and that's kind of like a lower price point for people who just kind of want to get their feet wet. And then I do have a membership program where we actually directly work together, and it's a little bit more extensive in terms of what we do, but it's the same goal, same process that we're going through, and that's called the Life Navigator system.
Yeah, I think those programs are very, very valuable because I think most young people and people in general, they go through life, they're told to go follow their passions, and then people say follow your interests, and then maybe
Yeah,
the careers doesn't line up. I've got a decent paying job, but I feel soulless. I feel like I should be doing something else.
yeah,
So
exactly.
having that,
Yeah.
more structured program really makes sense to me.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like I actually wish I had somebody guiding me through that whole. I mean, I have had mentors. Don't get me wrong. I have had good mentors along the way, but I wish I had somebody who was not attached to. All of them were in the industry that I was pursuing, right? When I had them, I wish it were somebody. I had somebody at the time who were detached from all those industries who could kind of look at the bigger picture, kind of guide me through what it was I really not only wanted to do, but what was really the best strategic path financially, and in line with my values and all of that. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. So before we go, if people want to follow your content, reach out to you, or even sign up for your program, what should they do?
They can actually just go right to my channel, and it's Stephen Petro 411. You see Stephen Petro 411. That's my handle on YouTube. And then in my About Me section, you could just go straight through there. You'll see my links to all my programs and offers. And yeah, and you can get in touch with me directly. I very much welcome emails from people, and I'm happy to just have an extended conversation and kind of help you through whatever you would like to talk about. So, yeah,
That's great. Thank you, Stephen. Really appreciate it.
absolutely. Thank you for having me, Vin.
You
Had a
bet.
great time.